Hello and welcome to a special Gamescom edition of Starside Chat. I am one of your hosts, Aaron, and with me as always is Zach. How's it going, Zach?
Good. Yeah, school has started officially as of this recording.
It's true.
So we're basically to fall, although not technically yet.
I woke up this morning and looked at my phone, and I had a heat advisory warning.
Yeah.
Which I did not like to see.
Unfortunately, it is going to be extremely hot today as we're recording this, and I think over the next week it's going to be really hot.
But hopefully the nights will be not as bad. I mean, last week there were a couple nights where it was pretty chilly out, and I very much enjoyed it.
Yeah, I would love that if you could just like open a window and let a cool breeze come in. But
Zach, opening night live happened. What is it? Opening night live. ONL for Gamescom. Was a thing that happened. We took a week off because I was sick last weekend. But we've got lots of news to get to before Gamescom, if you want to dive in.
Yeah, some of it maybe ties in a little bit because the Borderlands movie, we're a little late talking about this, but the movie came out and flopped really badly and got very bad reviews. And that kind of a little bit ties into Gamescom because there was a Borderlands 4 reveal. I don't know if you want to jump the gun and start talking about that at all, but
I believe it was the first thing they talked about at opening night live. Jeff Keighley was like, here's our first announcement. This one definitely didn't leak. And he showed the trailer, and sure enough, it was Borderlands 4. And it seems to maybe have a different art style. Famously, Borderlands has that like cel-shaded look where everything looks very cartoony. But maybe this is just a cinematic, and it's not demonstrate how it's actually going to look. But it seemed to look real, actually. Like, basically, there's no gameplay or anything. It's just a cinematic. But a world comes... I don't know anything about the lore of Borderlands, but it seems as though a planet is traveling in space, and then we zoom in on the planet, and there's like a crash or something, and then a hand picks up a mask, and it's one of those...
A very robotic hand.
Yeah, very robotic hand picks up a mask, and it's one of those... I don't know what they're called. Those crazy people.
I don't either. Everybody recognizes it as a Borderlands mask.
The Borderlands mask
I couldn't
guy.
tell you the name.
Yeah. But yeah, that's no release date or anything. It's just been announced. Borderlands 4.
I mean, famously, Borderlands, when it was like the first one was going to launch, it was like right around the time of like Fallout 3, I think, and like maybe some other like post-apocalyptic style games. And so Gearbox was like, okay, we need to differentiate ourselves. And so they like delayed the game and revamped it with this like really cel-shaded sort of cartoony art style. And I think that helped to differentiate it enough that people were into it based on that. And of course, the gameplay style is a little bit different from something like Fallout. But yeah, if they go away from that, I would be curious to see what the reaction from like the fans are, because it's so like, I don't know, tied into what Borderlands is at this point. It seems like
it almost makes me want to try it more. I have never played any Borderlands games. I think one of the reasons is because I was not, the art style didn't super mesh with me, and also it seemed like the humor was bad. But I don't know if they fixed that part. But it not being a crazy cartoon is interesting to me.
Do you think they would get the actors from the movie at all for Borderlands 4?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Because the movie, like, the guy that directed it, I don't remember his name, but he's like the person in charge of it. He was like famously talking about how they were just trying to get the best actors possible. And you can tell that they got some like good actors because Cate Blanchett is in it, but like, they're not the right actors for it. They're just, I guess, the best people they could get for it. And it's just everybody, like even people who don't know the series knows Cate Blanchett just does not fit the character. Great actress, but not a role that she should have taken.
Just an insane, every decision they made with this movie, you just have to take a step back and be like, what is going on? Like, what made you think this was a good idea?
Yeah. And I heard that Cate Blanchett only took the role because it was like COVID times and she was bored in her house and like didn't have anything to do, didn't have any projects. So she just kind of went with it. And I wonder if she regrets that now. But
Yeah, because this has been in post for a super long time. I feel like we got that like image of they did like a Gearbox checks out the set of Borderlands.
Yeah.
I feel like I watched that like 3 years ago. So
yeah, even that was a long time ago.
it's been in development for a while, and it got delayed, and finally it's out. But I don't know.
The movie
man.
took as long to make as one of the games.
It's true. I don't know where they go from here. I almost feel like they will never mention this movie again because it did so bad.
Yeah, it'll be like the Mario movie where they just don't. They pretend it doesn't exist.
Reboot.
So another interesting thing that came up, again, some of this is like, we got like 2 weeks worth of news to cover, I guess, but, PUBG, the, publisher has acquired Tango GameWorks. So basically they have revived Tango GameWorks. Everybody was very sad that, Microsoft was like closing that studio, but, back from the dead. And so Hi-Fi Rush, I guess, does have a potential future now because they bought the IP as well on top of Tango GameWorks. I wonder if that means we'll get like another Ghostwire Tokyo at some point.
I don't know. It's such a weird acquisition. Like, I would never have picked PUBG as the publisher to buy them.
Yeah, that did seem like an odd one to buy it, but I mean, I think everybody's happy that Tango is
for sure.
not dead, but yeah, an odd choice, it seems like. But I do like that. I would rather there be a world where instead of just like closing things down, they just like find somebody to buy them. I a little bit am keeping my fingers crossed that like Game Informer will get an announcement like a month later that like somebody has bought Game Informer from GameStop and revived it, but I don't think that's going to happen. Another fun, interesting thing is that the Plucky Squire finally got a release date, and there were like a bunch of previews for the game. I don't know if you got a chance to see any of this, but
no, I didn't check any of this out.
Game looks really, really good. Sort of storybook type of a setting, but the character is able to jump out of the storybook and do stuff in the real world. I think at one point, the villain like kicks him out of the storybook world, and so he has to like do a lot of exploring in more of like a real world sort of like bedroom setting, and then venture back into the book. And sometimes you're jumping in and out of the book to get items, and then go back in the book to solve some sort of puzzle with an item that you got in the real world. But yeah, it has like some top-down Zelda vibes to it. It has like some of those, Mario, where, from Odyssey, when you're able to jump into like a 2D space and then jump out into a 3D space and stuff like that. So seems like a lot of like inspiration went into this, but like they've really sort of done their own unique thing with it as well. But it's coming September 17th, so not too much longer to wait for
Less than a month away.
Yeah. So I'm pretty excited about this. I think I will play it when it comes out. So we'll probably talk about that on the podcast, I'm sure. A couple of little like DLC things. Vampire Survivors got another update. I don't know if you have been following any of this, but they just keep churning out stuff for it. But there's supposed to be new achievements, an extra challenge stage, a new relic, 2 special character skins, and 5 new arenas dropped on Vampire Survivors. So if you're still playing that,
I did
check that out.
So like one of the people you can play as that I think is, I don't know if he's unlocked automatically right when you get the game, but there's the old man with the garlic who is a classic character.
I think he is.
And he has a new skin now where it's like his retired skin, and now he's just in a rocking chair and he just rocks back and forth while you play as him.
That's awesome. Another DLC, Dredge got another DLC called the Iron Rig, which I believe is out now. I was thinking about Dredge just recently. I don't know if it was because I played it around this time, like last year or maybe the year before. I don't even remember how old this game is, but I think it was big last year and I played it. But it seems cool. I think I am into playing more Dredge. I would probably check that out. And then, I almost missed it, but Dragon Age The Veilguard got a release date of October 31st. So Halloween, we'll be playing Dragon Age.
Did you see, I didn't put this in the show notes, but they had some sort of like combat showcase that was in 4 parts, and then they edited it down to be one video. Did you see that?
From Dragon Age?
Yeah.
No, I didn't see that.
I don't know if it was part of Gamescom or what, but if you search for like Veilguard combat showcase, there's like a very long version of it, and then there's an edited down short version of it where they just give you the best stuff. But I skipped through it. It looked interesting.
Yeah, I'm into it. I think hopefully it will do well for them, because I don't want to see BioWare go away, and I feel like they're one of those studios that's just like if they have another big flop, they might be on the chopping block. But
where are we at with Mass Effect?
I feel like that's probably like there's probably 2 or 3 people in a closet writing notes on napkins for Mass Effect, the next Mass Effect, while everybody else is like hard at work on trying to finish up Dragon Age The Veilguard. And then once they release that, they will be able to like shift a bunch of the team to Mass Effect, and some big progress will start being made on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, they've announced it. So supposedly there is some work and some progress that has been made on the next Mass Effect, but I couldn't tell you much more beyond that.
I mean, they had that very short Vidoc years ago where it was just like, take a look at these assets for the next Mass Effect game. It's definitely happening. There's going to be a snow planet, seems like.
Yeah, every November 7th is In 7 Day. So they always release some little teasery things, and like the one they did last year was like very hard to parse. Like I could not have picked up on what they were trying to tell me without the help of like internet sleuths. But so I guess stay tuned for November 7th this year. I wonder if they'll, because Dragon Age will be out by then, if they will have anything of interest to sort of drop for the community to pour over for the next weeks and months until the next big announcement from Mass Effect. But did you see this Nintendo Museum thing?
I started watching it. It looks interesting, but I didn't finish the video. I'm glad that it exists, but I didn't watch the whole little showcase. They had a museum direct.
Yeah, it is like a thing that's in Japan, so like maybe they will bring it to the US at some point. Maybe it's sort of similar to like the Super Nintendo World at Universal, where they start it in Japan and then they eventually bring one to the US at some point. But it's just like a little museum of the history of Nintendo, and there's like a bunch of little like games and stuff that to play, so it feels like a little bit like an amusement park but indoors, just without roller coasters. But I think it was fun to watch. I don't know that this is as interesting to me as like Super Nintendo World, but if this was like close by to me, I would probably go check this out. But I don't know that I would like pay to go travel to see this specifically. And then we have to talk about Black Myth Wukong, which came out this last week as we're recording this. It's not been 2 weeks, right?
No, it just came out.
And it has already broken the single player Steam record on day one for like, had more than 2 million concurrent users, which breaks the single player Steam record.
And you are one of those players. Am I correct?
I am one of those players, yes. So we will talk about that when we get to our play and watching. But it sold 10 million copies across all platforms within the first week of release. So it's a massive success. People do love their Souls-likes. And like we've been following this game for a long time, it feels like.
It's true.
Because they've been like slowly drip feeding like those teaser videos for years, it seems like. And this was one of those mini games that was like, I don't think this is ever coming out, just because we had seen so many videos for years and years and years, and it just didn't seem like we would ever get to the point where they would actually release it. But here we are, it's out, and people are playing it. And of course, the 2 million concurrent users that were playing it on day one, that's just Steam. So that doesn't account for like PlayStation. And I believe this is on Xbox. Am I wrong about that?
I don't know. I would think so.
Anyway, I'm playing it on PlayStation. There was a little bit of concern there for a little while, that because they were like being weird about not like releasing previews for the PlayStation version of the game, and so people were worried that like, oh, this might be like a sort of a technical disaster. But that has turned out not to be the case. It is running just fine. So, and then on the opposite end of the spectrum from the success of Black Myth Wukong, we have Concord, which also came out this last week. It's only been out as we're recording this for like a couple days, but it is turning out to be a massive flop for PlayStation.
What was the peak?
And,
you told me the peak player for Concord on Steam?
Yeah, people were posting on Reddit the all-time peak on launch day did not break 700 players. So this game did not do well at all. I suspected it would not do well. Weirdly, like, I gave it a chance. I wanted to give it a fair shot before, but I played it and my impression was that it was not going to do well. I think the gameplay is fine. It plays pretty well. The characters are not interesting at all. I have no interest whatsoever about their week-to-week story stuff. And the like unlocks and all of that stuff did not seem interesting to me, so I don't know why anyone would pay for cosmetics in this game. And like the big failure of this is that there's like none of the characters have ultimates or super abilities, so there's not that like game-altering ability that you can use for any of the characters. So it does just kind of feel like a fairly generic like hero shooter version of Call of Duty, which I don't know who wants that. But they're trying to do this like weird sort of Destiny style week to week sort of game or story progression type of thing. But like there's like no one knows these characters. No one cares about the characters. They're not like, it seems like a sort of off-brand Overwatch, off-brand Guardians of the Galaxy. And so nobody's tuning in for that. So I don't know. And we were talking a little bit before we started recording. It also seems like a massive mistake to charge $40 for this game, as opposed to just like having it be a free-to-play game. But
it's wild also that we only became aware of it like 2 months ago. They just like kept it under wraps and revealed it at Keighley's showcase. They're like, here's a brand new thing. And it's apparently been in development for 8 years. And it's just no one's going to talk about it in like another month.
Yeah, it is already dead, basically.
It's wild. A huge miscalculation to make it $40.
It is. And I like PlayStation talked about how they wanted to do a bunch of game as service games. And we had a success with Helldivers earlier this year, and now Concord, but they're wanting to charge $40 for like all of these games, it seems like. And I feel like that's just a mistake. Like, game as service games probably should be free to play at this point. I feel like we've learned that over time. And a point I always bring up with these is, if the game is free to play, you don't have to pay for a subscription to PlayStation Network or Xbox Live to play them on a console. Whereas if they charge $40, all of a sudden you also, on top of that, have to pay for a subscription to PlayStation Network. It makes no sense. I don't know why it's set up this way, but that's how it is. So it just doesn't make any sense to make it charge $40 for this game. I don't know. This was just a mistake all around, and I don't know who. We talked about Bungie being in trouble for placing bad bets.
Yeah.
This was a bad bet by Sony. So
So wild. I wonder if we're going to see anything about it as like the weeks happen and they start to push out that weekly content, or if like no one's going to cover it and it's just going to go away. Like, I also wonder how far ahead they've worked as far as like weekly content. If they have like a year's worth of storyline, or what's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question if they have like done a lot of work to sort of map out the sort of future of this game, and all of that is gonna like not happen at this point, or if they were sort of flying by the seat of their pants and they sort of like, okay, we just need to concentrate on getting the game out the door,
Yeah.
and once we do that, we can figure the rest out later. All right, let's run down some of the stuff that was shown at Gamescom.
Yes, some interesting stuff. So they opened with the Borderlands 4 reveal, and I have put in a couple other things that were interesting. Another, like, kind of inside the industry interesting thing is they revealed a new trailer for the Indiana Jones and the Great Circle game, but they also revealed it's coming to PlayStation 5, which is a real reversal from what they were saying even months ago.
Yeah, there was, after it, like, leaked that a bunch of the Xbox exclusive games, like, what was it, Sea of Thieves and Pentiment and a couple others, I don't remember which ones they were.
Those are the two I remember.
We're going to come to PlayStation. They're basically going cross-platform with them. And everybody freaked out because they were like, oh, this is the death of Xbox, because who's going to buy an Xbox console if they can get all of these plus the exclusives from PlayStation by getting a PlayStation 5? There's no need to buy an Xbox now.
It's true.
Which means that console is going to fail. And it is this like weird situation where for years Xbox struggled in the console war because they didn't have their own exclusives. But now that they bought all the studios to make their exclusives, their console's not doing well enough to have the install base to make those games exclusive and still be profitable.
Yeah.
So now they have to offer them as multi-platform games. And so they're in this weird catch-22 situation. And I don't see how this ends up being a positive for the Xbox brand. I feel like it'll be fine to release, like they'll make more money. And it is weird to like, there's like a disconnect listening to a lot of like the games media people talk about this, because they're like, I don't see how it's a bad thing to make all the game, like get rid of exclusives and make the games for everyone. And it's like, well, sure, on like maybe a moral, ethical level, that's true. But from a business standpoint, you're going to kill the Xbox console by doing this. And I get that like they don't really have an option, because like this console generation of Xbox hasn't sold well enough to, I guess, make a profit by selling it exclusively on Xbox.
It's been such a weird generation because it started out with the pandemic and there were like all those shortages. And now you're at the point where you actually can walk into any store and buy an Xbox. But I don't know. I feel like there's that initial rush that they missed. Like they always talk about how movies make their money in the first like weekend box office. And I wonder if it's similar to like consoles are similar, where everybody wants one right away and we couldn't get them for years. And now that they're available, people are just like, whatever, it's almost time for the next one, so maybe just wait.
Yeah, between both Microsoft and Sony sort of positioning their, like trying not to get rid of the install base of the previous console, because there's still a lot of those out there.
Yeah.
And their new consoles haven't sold quite as well as the old ones yet. They're like, well, we still need that install base too, so we got to make our games still playable on the old hardware.
Yeah.
So between that and, I don't know, the fact that we're probably not terribly far from the next generation.
They say 2027 is when we should start thinking about it.
Plus, I think like people our age and older are probably accustomed to playing games on consoles because we grew up with them. But I feel like the younger audience plays games on mobile devices and PC. And so, I don't know. I feel like maybe the like consoles are probably struggling across the board, except for Nintendo, which is like the weird sort of they can march to the beat of their own drum and be fine.
And do whatever they want.
I feel like this console generation in general, between PlayStation and Xbox hasn't done as well as previous ones, but PlayStation has done better than Xbox. But yeah, I feel like Phil Spencer more or less lied to fans is what it comes down to at that sort of, because they had that that little like press conference type of thing after that announcement where and everybody was freaking out, and they were like, okay, we need to sort of do some sort of discussion to sort of talk about this. And in that discussion, he was like, it's just these old 4 games that have already sort of, hit the height of their sales, and now like in order to sort of get more out of those sales, we can shift those out to other platforms and make a little bit more money on them. And he specifically said this is not Starfield and it's not Indiana Jones. Well, it turns out it is now Indiana Jones as well. So I don't know if they knew that was likely and it was a lie, or if the plans have changed since then and it became a lie. But either way, it doesn't look good for Xbox. So I don't know. I feel like we're sort of witnessing the beginning of the end for the Xbox console, but
it's crazy.
Maybe in like a generation or two, the whole console hardware thing looks extremely different from today, and it's not even a console box that you're getting. I don't know.
A couple other things. So this is all out of order. But another big announcement. This is actually the thing they closed with. They thought it was like their big one more thing. I didn't particularly care about this, but I know the Mafia games have a following that people really are passionate about. They revealed Mafia: The Old Country. I have a question for you, Zach.
Okay.
Do you care about Mafia: The Old Country?
Not at all.
I mean, good for them for getting this exclusive announcement, but yeah, not super into that. They had a bunch of Civ 7 stuff, including a big... so they had one trailer that they showed in the showcase that revealed like the new art style and some like specifics about it. And then on the floor of Gamescom, there's been a lot more coverage about things that are interesting about it. I'm not particularly a Civ guy. Are you?
No, not really.
A long time ago, one of my old friends used to be into Civ 6 right when it came out. This is something else to talk about. It's been like 8 years since we got in a Civ game, which I think is the longest time between Civilization games. But I played Civ 6 for a little bit, and I found it to be not for me. But I guess the most interesting thing to call out about this one is you don't start out as, like, you can pick a civilization, but the thing that is constant is your leader stays the same. And then your civilization can kind of morph as the different eras change. Apparently, this is a huge departure from what it used to be. I was watching a video that said there were like a bunch of they're taking a lot of big swings with this that people are excited about. So that's cool. We already talked about Borderlands 4. Inzoi. Have you heard of this?
No, I was not sure what this was.
This is a Sims competitor that everyone's talking about. There are 2 things I've put on this list that give me real Doka V vibes. I'm constantly chasing that high of that Doka V trailer. So this one is a super, super customizable Sims experience where you create your character, or possibly characters, and you also can also create their homes. There's like a very in-depth home creator, and you sort of just chill out and do things. I put this on here because a ton of people have been posting. They released the character editor for this, I think for free, and I really hope they do a Monster Factory, because people have been making wild people. Like, you can really go all out and create insane-looking people with their character creator. I
was going to say, visually, this looks way more detailed and better than any of the Sims games I've seen.
It's been forever since a Sims game, I feel like. They did all those expansions for the last one, because that's where I think where they really make their money, is just like pumping out expansions. And I I know that there's a new Sims in development, but I don't know what the status of that is or if we've seen anything about it. But this is a real disruptor. Like, I think people that have been waiting for a new Sims game will jump on this.
Now that you mention it, it's crazy to me that nobody has really competed with The Sims in that space for that type of game until now.
It's wild.
It seems like an obvious one because I feel like that series like does super well with like its, you know, particular niche audience. So I don't know. So it was waiting for somebody to come along and
perhaps
compete.
that somebody is Inzoi.
Inzoi.
I think I'm pronouncing that
INZOI.
Yeah.
A strange one. But.
I don't know if this is part. I think it is. Yeah, part of Gamescom. There are some embargoes got lifted, and there were some press showings of Avowed, and people are saying it's great. IGN has a little like 10-minute video. It's like 8 minutes of I think a hands-off preview they had. They didn't get to play it, but they watched someone play it. A lot of insights, a lot of interesting things, a lot of things to be excited for. What's your hype level for Avowed? I'm still pretty hot on it.
Yeah, I still want to play this. I liked Obsidian's last game, The Outer Worlds, and I am into the idea of like probably a smaller version of like a Skyrim style game. Made by Obsidian because they're usually pretty good with like storytelling and characters and all of that stuff. I did see a preview. I forget who posted it, but they were saying the like the magic based class and like I guess maybe a rogue. They use like dual pistols or whatever. Those classes they were saying feel good to use, whereas like the more melee focused like barbarian class didn't feel as good to play. It felt a little floaty in a similar way to like Skyrim, which is, you know, a super old game compared to, you know, today,
I feel like it's hard to master first person melee combat, and it doesn't surprise me that that's like going to be the weakest class to play as, or not weakest, but like least fun.
Yeah, but I mean, visually it looks nice.
It's very striking. There's a lot of like fungi all over the place. It's just a very interesting looking world.
There was an interview that the developers did where they basically more or less confirmed that this was going to be running at 30 frames a second, which is a little bit of a bummer. So it would be very nice if they could eventually do a big patch, kind of the way Bethesda did with Starfield, to eventually get this running at 60 plus frames a second. But it seems like at launch, this is going to be running at 30, which is not ideal, especially for a first-person game, but yeah, I mean, it might be fine. I did play through Starfield in 30 frames a second on Xbox, so, you know.
Yeah, I didn't have a problem with that.
As long as it's running smoothly and it maintains a solid 30 frames, I think you can get by with that, but it's like a little bit of an adjustment your eyes have to go through, where it's a little bit off-putting at first, but the longer you play it, the more your eyes adjust to it, and then it becomes fine. And then you go play like a 60-plus frames per second game and go back to it, and you're like, oh, what is this? It's terrible.
A whole new world.
That happened to me with Dragon's Dogma 2 earlier this year.
Yeah.
I started playing that game, and I was like, yeah, this is fine. And then I went and played some other games that were running at a much higher frame rate, and I came back to it, and I was like, oh, how was I playing this before? What is the Stone of Madness?
This was not part of the showcase. It's just on the floor of Gamescom. But I wanted to shout it out because I think it's very unique, and it's something I think I think it could get a really big pop at the end of the year, and people might think that it's it's coming in 2025, so it's not going to get Game of the Year this year. But it's something I've never seen before. So it's a tactical real-time stealth game set in the 18th century in a monastery where there are 5 people who are prisoners. And you sort of have to, I think you play as all of them, and you can switch back and forth, and you have to escape this monastery. But everyone has like strengths and weaknesses. There's a part in the trailer where like one of the girls, I think, is afraid of fire, and so she like can't be near fire. It's really interesting. It's isometric, and I've never seen anything like it. It's almost like when I was playing Case of the Golden Idol. It's just like such a unique concept for a video game. I really want to see how it plays. It's just I was enthralled by this trailer. I am not sure how you play it, or if you have to pick one person at the beginning, or if you swap between them. It's got these animated cutscenes. I don't know. I'm very interested in it.
I'm trying to think of what was the name of that game where you're like a detective.
Oh, yes. It's like Disco Elysium.
Disco Elysium. That's what I was trying to think of. I could not think of the name of it.
Similar art style to Disco Elysium, yeah.
I was like, this looks like if like you took Pentiment and Disco Elysium and like mixed it together and made a game out of it.
Which, like, there's a certain type of person who, if you say that, their heads will explode, because those are two like kind of niche games that have like very active fan bases that just like love them. And I feel like this is exactly what that group of people will want.
It's from the creators of Blasphemous, which is also like a really well-liked game, or series of games. So, I feel like there is definitely an audience that's like super hyped for something like this.
The last trailer I put on here is a game. This is the other game that gave me real Dokkaev vibes. I don't know what the gameplay of this is, but very similar to Dokkaev. I kept watching this trailer and insane stuff kept happening. And I was just like, what is this? And it is called Infinity Nikki. And it seems to be a game where it's like possibly a Pokemon type of game where there are a bunch of critters that you can collect. I don't even know if you're collecting them. It just seems like they exist. And you are a girl who is around, and I can't even tell you what this game is about, but it just looks insane to me, and I wanted to call it out.
Yeah, I remember seeing a trailer for this over the summer, and it seemed like, I don't know, they're calling it a cozy open world adventure game, but it looks kind of like Genshin Impact, but with like way more cutesy critters and way less action or combat.
There's a train in it as well, it seems like, that can just like run around. There's a boss possibly they show in this. I'm not sure. There's a part where you're on a catapult and you get shot off. There's a lot of stuff going on in this game, and I don't really know what the like second to second gameplay is going to be, but I
couldn't tell you based on that trailer.
I'm very interested in whatever this is going to be.
The other one I wanted to shout out is a game called Reanimal, which when I looked at the thumbnail for the trailer, I thought they had renamed the game that replaced game, but that is not the case. This is a game from the developers of Little Nightmares, and I guess I don't, because somebody else is handling Little Nightmares 3.
Which
so I'm not sure
I didn't put it in the show notes, but we did get a trailer for Little Nightmares 3, which I thought was this, but I guess is not.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on here, but I guess the developers of Little Nightmares are branching out and doing something that may or may not be a Little Nightmares like spinoff. I don't even know like story-wise what's going on here, but it looks interesting to me. It looks like more like
gross,
genuine horror, whereas like Little Nightmares is a little bit like, it's creepy and scary, but you could probably play it with like a younger person and not have it give them like horrible nightmares for weeks.
Yeah, this one is like they're fully leaning into. This is the one where they released that teaser like a week ago where it's just like a pig walks up and then all of its intestines fall out and then it just like makes a terrible sound. I think it talks in a really creepy voice.
Yeah, they're definitely leaning hardcore into the horror element of this as opposed to like it just being creepy vibes and like weird universe. They're like, nah, this is like full on horror this time. But like similar gameplay style to Little Nightmares. It's like the same kind of game, but way more into the horror vibe of it.
Disgusting.
Yeah. So I think I am maybe a little bit more interested in Little Nightmares 3 than this, but like that studio that did the Little Nightmare games, like did those so well that I almost wonder if this will be like more well received than Little Nightmares 3. So I don't know. And now we come to what we're playing and watching. I did play a little bit more SteamWorld Heist 2. I haven't finished that game, but I do really like it, and I think it's like a very good game if you like sort of turn-based like tactical gameplay. It's like a 2D version of something like an XCOM or a Mario and Rabbids style game. But I did start Black Myth Wukong, and I've really been enjoying it. It is a Souls-like kind of game, and those like sometimes hit with me, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes I'm in the mood for them, and sometimes I just can't get into them for whatever reason. But this one's doing it for me. I don't know. Like presentationally, I think they did a really good job with it. There's like all these really big moments, and like it is like a pretty linear game, but you're like dealing with lots of bosses. Like people have sort of described it as like boss rush, where like you're basically going from one boss to the next, and there are just these like little fairly linear pathways where you're taking out like smaller enemies that
it's
are
like a Cuphead.
Like well, no, that's level based. This is more, but I guess you could say that. But the other comparison it's getting is like God of War. Like maybe it's somewhere between like God of War and like a Dark Souls game.
Yeah,
because that similarly, if you really break it down and sort of to its base elements, it is sort of you're going from one boss to the next with these sort of linear pathways between. But the combat's like really fun, and it is like recognition of moves and like timing your dodges and things like that. I have not found it to be like super difficult, like just relatively speaking to like something like Elden Ring, but it is also sort of in the same vein as like a Dark Souls style game. You can sort of grind out kills in those linear pathways leading up to a boss.
That's what I was going to ask about.
Gain some levels.
What's the character progression like? You're not getting new weapons, right? You're getting new skills or powers?
You're getting new skills and abilities and different things you can throw at enemies, different powers sort of. You can like upgrade your weapon, but you're not swapping out your weapon. And there are a ton of skill trees. So like every there are sort of like more passive abilities and things like that to put points into, and there are like the different abilities and such like that you're putting points into as well. So there's always like, it's very difficult to decide where I want to allot my points every time I level up. But yeah, you're also like able to craft armor and things like that. And so there are different ways to sort of make yourself stronger going into the next boss fight. But I've also found the boss fights to be like fun and interestingly designed, and not like overly like, I never get to one and I'm like, oh, I don't think I'll ever beat this guy. Like you get close enough where you're like, oh, I think I can definitely take this guy. I just need to try it a few more times. But so it's been like really satisfying to beat the bosses, and I've only completed the first chapter. I'm into chapter 2 of, I believe, 6 chapters maybe. Okay. So I'm not super far into it just yet, but already feel like I've taken out a good number of bosses. So it's been fun. It's been very cool, and I'm gonna play more of it, and I guess we'll talk more about it later. But glad to see it's doing super well as also, because it's pretty fun.
Zach, I watched a movie.
I see you have written Monster Hunter in here.
Zach, I watched the Monster Hunter movie for some reason.
Is this on Netflix? What is this?
I don't know. I found a way to watch it that was legal to do.
Oh, really?
No, I just rented it on Google Play.
Oh, gotcha.
And Zach, it was not good.
I'm very surprised by that.
It stars Mila Jovovich, and they did that thing that I hate that they do, where when you have a fantastical world, they, for some reason, need to include our world in it. This happened a lot, like, in the 80s and 90s, where, like, they would have this fantastical world, and then they would be like, well, these characters are now in New York for some reason. Like Masters of the Universe is one where they just like dropped everybody in America. And similarly, they could have just set this in. Oh, I don't know the world. What's the world of Monster Hunter? Is there a name for it?
I'm sure there is. I can't think of it off the top of my head.
They could have just set it in that world, but instead, they had to have like Earth be part of it for some reason. So Mila Jovovich is driving around in a Humvee because she's part of like the military or whatever, and then she goes through a portal basically and goes into Monster Hunter World. And Zach, there's monsters in Monster Hunter World, and so she doesn't have a great time. But she meets Tony Jaa.
But they all have guns.
Well, guns aren't going to do anything against a Rathalos.
So you got to get a big old sword.
You got to get a sword or a spear or a wrist
or a
crossbow.
bow and arrow.
Yeah, or bow and arrow. Not good. Very insanely paced. Like the first part of it is they basically are trapped on this rock formation because there's this burrowing dragon. And so if they get into the sand, very similar to Trimmers, if they touch the sand, he will come out. And so they're trapped on this rock formation, but also at nighttime spiders come out, and the spiders are very dangerous. And so the first like 2/3 of this movie is her being on this rock formation, eventually befriending Tony Jaa, and them like figuring out how to get off the rock formation. And then the last third of the movie is them getting to a new location, which is like an oasis location, and then having to deal with a Rathalos and like getting back to Earth and then going back to Monster Hunter World. It's not good, but the craziest thing about this movie is that it starts out with Ron Perlman, who's wearing an insane wig, and is just like chilling out on this boat that like traverses sand for some reason. And then he seemingly dies. And for a long portion of this movie, I thought, man, it's crazy that they had Ron Perlman, they put him in a crazy wig, and he didn't even get a line. And that's like it. But he does come back at the end, and for some reason, I think just for plot contrivances, he speaks perfect English when nobody else in Monster Hunter Land does. And the way they explain that away is he's just like, oh yeah, I know about your world. That's it. That's how he speaks perfect English. And so Mila Jovovich is able to be like, I gotta get back or whatever. I think this movie could have been slightly better if it had focused on just Tony Jaa, who is a great person. And I don't know if he's a good person, but I loved his old movies like Ong Bak, and I think Tom Yong-goong was that other one. But just a wild thing. I mean, I guess the reason that Mila Jovovich is in this is because the guy who directed this is her husband, who also directed all of the Resident Evil movies that she is in. So it's basically just another Resident Evil movie, kind of, except it's got a bunch of weird scenes. Like she has her wedding ring that is maybe her husband is dead. I'm not sure, but she keeps it in an Altoids tin for some reason. And at one point she finds it, and it's just like supposed to be this very emotional scene, but all it is her like picking up the Altoids tin, sitting down and being like, oh my God, yes, I got it. And she like kisses the Altoids tin. It's a really weird scene. Maybe it works in another language, but Zach, it's the first movie I've rated 1 star on Letterboxd.
Wow. Yeah, it's crazy to me that they would make a Monster Hunter movie, but sort of have like a Western cast in it and do that dumb thing where they set it in the real world and it's just like they go to this alternate reality as opposed to just like really living within the fiction of the game universe.
They really wanted this to be, I think, a series because it ends, the last like 30 seconds of the movie is a cloaked figure who you don't see his face watching over them. And then he like goes away. So they wanted this to, it ends basically with them being like, well, we got to keep doing this. And they continue to fight the Rathalos. And so I think they wanted this to be another Resident Evil type thing where they can make like 6 of them. But Zach, this came out in 2020, and there hasn't really been any movement on a sequel, I don't think.
I guess that's not surprising. Yeah, I have not seen this, but it does not look good. from watching the trailer while you were talking about it.
Not great. And frankly, a poor use of Tony Jaa, who I wish was in more movies. But
I feel like if like some Japanese movie studio decided to make this and they actually like leaned into the game universe as opposed to whatever this was, it might have been a better version of that. But even the like Monster Hunter games themselves have like fairly minimalistic stories that are not like, nobody plays them because, oh, the story's great. It's all about like the gameplay and the progression. So
I mean, they do some things right. They kill one monster and craft something out of it to fight another monster. Like there's a core of a good idea in here where it's like, oh, this is part of the video game, but most of it is just like truly incomprehensible and terrible, and it's very poorly paced. Like you don't need to. I watched a movie one time. What was the name of that movie? There was some movie where it was a bunch of kids, I think, living in LA, and a crazy thing about it was that like the first 2/3 of the movie, it was one of those movies where it takes place all in one day, and I was like, okay, I'm into this. Like a lot of things are happening to this guy in the span of a day, but then. The last third of the movie, fully like a third of the movie, was just like took place over a year basically, of them being just like, okay, this stuff happened, now let's like deal with it for like a year, and it just like did not work for me. It was just such a weird whiplash. I don't remember what the name of that movie was, but this was similar, where like I thought we were just going to be just the two of them the whole movie, and then the last third of it was them like getting to an oasis and like. Ron Perlman is reintroduced and has like a bunch of lore he talks about, and then they have to get to a tower for some reason. Is there a tower in Monster Hunter? Is there a special tower in Monster Hunter?
Not that I remember.
That's like the main thing about this movie is there's a special tower.
I don't know. Maybe that was an element in one of the Monster Hunters I didn't play, but...
I don't know. Anyway, Aaron rates this a 0. Or I guess 1 star on Letterboxd.
Does it let you do 0 stars on Letterboxd?
No, it doesn't, I don't think. So I had to give it a 1, I believe.
Well, there you go. There's the review of Monster Hunter. That was another one of those, like, Sony... they're attempting to do game as service games and movie, like, adaptations of different video game properties. And so this was another one of those. So I guess that's Sony firing on all cylinders recently. But, do you have any parting wisdom?
Yeah, you know what? This probably isn't advice that most people can take, but I went to a new restaurant, somewhat close to me, a little far away, but I didn't mind the drive. It was a hot dog place, because I am interested in hot dogs, but it also had 3 other things that it was. It was a hot dog, barbecue, like brewery beer on tap, like one of those walls with taps of beer, and also an axe throwing place. So it was 4 things. And I feel it did not do any of those things super well because it's a very small space. And so my advice to people opening a restaurant, which here's a subset of that advice, is don't open a restaurant. But if you are going to open a restaurant, pick a lane and don't try to do 4 things. Just try to do 1 thing well.
Good advice for aspiring business owners.
Yes, for entrepreneurs out there.
And on that note, why don't you go ahead and follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter at Starside Cafe, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.